I'll tell you how the whole week went. Terrible, terrible, terrible. It must have been National Frog Appreciation Week because frogs were all we talked about in room 26. First, Miss Brisbane taught everyone how to take care of Og. The students gathered around as she put on rubber gloves, picked up the insect container, and sprinkled a few of Og's tank. She didn't seem too happy about the crickets, which turned out to be quite large and ugly. The way they leaped around the tank, no wonder Og went boing. Did you see his tongue? AJ bellowed. It must have been a foot long. Ooh, he ate one, Heidi squealed. Gross, said Seth as Og's tongue grabbed the rest of the crickets. I want to pet him, said Mandy. Before anyone could stop her, she slid off of the tank, reached down, and picked up the big lump of frog. No, Mandy, said Miss Brisbane, but it was too late. He peed on me, she shrieked, dropping Og back into his tank. Not that I blame her. What unsqueakable bad manners. Is that any way for a class pet to act? Seth jumped back, shaking his hand. Ooh! Gail giggled, and of course, so did everyone else. Wash your hands with plenty of soap and hot water, Miss Brisbane told Mandy. The rest of the class, she said, that's what frogs do when they're frightened. We must all be gentle with poor Og. If you have to touch him, you must wear gloves. Pick him up by the shoulder blades and never squeeze his stomach, or you'll hurt him. She ordered my classmates back to their seats, not including Mandy, who was washing her hands. Then we had to learn more frog facts. They don't start out as cute, furry little babies like hamsters. No, no, no. They start out as funny little tadpoles, then grow into ugly-looking pollywogs, and then end up as big, lumpy frogs with bulgy eyes. For some strange reason, everyone was fascinated with frogs, except Tabitha and me. She paid more attention to her stuffed bear than anything else in class. I overheard Mandy complain to the other girls that Tabitha wasn't very friendly. I tried to get her to play at recess, but she wasn't interested in anything besides that old bear. She's a big baby. Saya murmured, maybe she's shy. I was pleased that Saya had learned to speak up, but the other girls decided Tabitha was just unfriendly. Someone else who was new in room 26. After so much frog talk, Miss Brisbane moved to the subject of poetry. First, we'll read a scary poem about Tiger. We also read a poem about a bee, followed by a silly poem about a purple cow. Some poems rhyme and some don't. But there are a lot of rhyming words like moon and June and cat and rat. Funny that those last two words rhyme, isn't it? At night, while Og stared into space, I made a list of rhyming words in my notebook. Better than trying to talk to him as he continued to give me the silent treatment. Jumpy, bumpy, grumpy, lumpy. Funny that those words rhyme too. After a few days spent reading poems, Miss Brisbane said it was time for us to write our own poems. There were louder groans than the first time she mentioned poetry. Miss Brisbane held up her hand, which meant everybody had to be quiet. All of this was in preparation for Valentine's Day, when our class will present a poetry festival for all of the parents. Each of you will recite a poem you wrote or one you like. There was no groans now. In fact, some of the students looked excited. Even Pay Attention Art Patel was paying attention. Miss Brisbane explained that our assignment was to write a poem about an animal, at least 6 lines long, with words that rhymed. Mandy raised her hand and the teacher called on her proudly. My name rhymes with candy cane, she proudly announced. Miss Brisbane smiled. That's right, Mandy Payne. Rhymes with candy cane. Does anyone else have a rhyming name? Richie rhymes with itchy, AJ blurted out. What? asked Repeat It Please Richie. Words were flying through my brain. Humphrey, Pumphrey, Dumphrey, Lumphrey. Gail rhymes with hail. Heidi forgot to raise her hand again. And fail, Kirk murmured. I heard that, Kirk Chin, said Miss Brisbane. Well, Kirk rhymes with jerk, said Heidi, who was always ready to defend her best friend Gail. Please no more, Miss Brain said firmly. Kirk also rhymes with work, so let's get back to work. I never saw my classmates work so hard before. Richie chewed on his pencil, Seth jiggled his leg, Heidi erased more than she wrote. Kirk scratched his head, and Miranda wrote and wrote and wrote. Then she stopped, raising her hand. Miss Brisbane, can you think of anything that rhymes with hamster? She asked. Let's throw that one out to the class, said the teacher. Anyone? Leave it to Gold Miranda to ask such a good question. It got everyone thinking because it was so quiet you could have heard a pencil drop. 2 pencils did, in fact. How about gangster? A voice called out. Raise your hand, Heidi. Miss Brisbane walked to the board. How about that, class? Does hamster rhyme with gangster? She wrote the word on the board and repeated them. Hear that? They don't quite have the same sound, do they? Well, I would hope not. Gangsters are bad guys, and I am definitely a good guy. Maybe you better find another word to rhyme, the teacher instructed. Try Humphrey, I squeaked in encouragement. There had to be something that rhymed. Try frog, shouted AJ. Lower your voice, AJ, Miss Brisbane reminded him. And raise your hand, added Heidi. Miss Brisbane shook her head and then began to write words on the board as my classmates shouted them out. Dog, fog, log, sog, clog, and more. Nothing rhymed with hamster. But everything rhymed with frog. How depressing. I wondered how many words rhyme with sad, like mad and bad. After recess, it was Miranda's turn to clean my cage. She always does an extra good job of cleaning my potty corner and changing my water and bedding. And she always has a special treat for me, like a piece of cauliflower. Yum. Sorry, Humphrey, I tried to write a poem about you, she told me. I think I'm going to have to write about Clem instead. Clem was Miranda's dog, the one who tried to eat me when I stayed at her house. How Golden Miranda could put up with Clem was beyond me. That night, I wrote my very first poem. I asked Og if he wanted to hear it. His silence wasn't too encouraging, but I decided I would read it anyways. When Miss Mac left me for Brazil, she made me sad, sad, sad. When Clem, the dog, was mean to me, I felt real mad, mad, mad. Now Og moved in, and he has got me feeling bad, bad, bad. In fact, this is the worst week I've ever had. I waited to hear Og's applaud, or at least give me a grudging boing. I only heard silence. When I glanced over at my neighbor, he was grinning from ear to ear, or he would have been if he had ears. Somehow his smile didn't cheer me up at all. I felt better the following day, though, because it was Friday. That meant I would get a little break from room 26 and the green grumpy lump. Every weekend, a different student took me home, and I had many wonderful adventures with my classmates and their families. I'd even go home with Principal Morales. This week, I was going home with Wait for the Bell Garth Tugwell. He wanted to take me home for a long time. Can I take Og home too? Asked Garth. I think Og can stay here, Miss Brisbane answered. Frogs don't need to eat every day, except when they're young. Funny, I didn't feel quite so sad, mad, bad anymore. Can your mom pick us up? AJ asked Garth after school. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him as we waited outside for the bus. I had a blanket covering my cage because it was cold outside. I didn't mind, though, as long as I was far, far, far away from Og, who hadn't even tried to say goodbye to me. My dad said not to bother her. She's been sick, said Garth. Couldn't your mom pick us up? I wish, AJ sighed. She has to pick up my sister from kindergarten and put the baby down for a nap. Did you tell your folks about Bean? Asked Garth. At least I thought he said Bean. Things sounded a little muffled under the brink. Blanket. "No," said AJ. "Last time I said somebody was picking me up, my dad signed me up for boxing lessons. I hated people punching me. It was the worst than being picked on." I tried to sort out what AJ meant by getting picked on. By Bean? By Boxing Bean? I didn't have time to figure it out before the bus arrived. "Here goes," said Garth, lifting my cage. "Let's stick together, no matter what." "Okay, be sure to sit in front by Miss Victoria," whispered AJ. "That's the safest." By the shuffling and the scuffling sounds, I could tell that we were on the bus. Luckily, a corner of the blanket slipped down, and I could see Miss Victoria, the bus driver, glancing over her shoulders. "Keep moving, guys," she said in a firm voice. "Whoa, ladies. One of you has to go. Can't have three in the seat." 3 first-grade girls were huddled together in the seat right behind the bus driver. "We're not moving until one of you goes." "You move, Beth." The girl on the end timidly got up and started down the aisle, nervously looking back at her friends. "Keep going, folks," Miss Virginia snapped. Suddenly, boom! The girl named Beth fell down flat on the floor, right in front of us. Her books slid around the floor in all directions. The bus was quiet as Beth lay there until somebody said, "Hey, Klutz, you dropped something." That was followed by a nasty snicker. "You tripped her," said AJ in a voice not quite as loud as usual. "Say, you, AJ, what does those letters stand for anyways? Awful jerk?" I crawled over to the side of the cage to see who was speaking. It was a big. He was big for a kid. He had spiky hair and a scowl on his face. As Garth and AJ bent over to help Beth pick up her books, Miss Victoria called to the back of the bus, "Garth, AJ, if you don't sit down so I can get moving, I'm going to report you two." "Yeah, Garth, Bugwort, sit down," the big kid snared. "I'm going to tell," Beth said softly. "Don't," AJ whispered back. "Bean will only get worse." So the big scary Bean they were talking about. Beth slid into the seat with all her books. Just as AJ stepped forward, Bean stuck his leg into the aisle. So that's how he had tripped her. After AJ managed to step over it, Garth and I, in my cage, were standing right next to Mr. Nasty. "What's in the cage, Bugface? Your lunch?" He snorted a few times, but no one else on the bus laughed. "Or is that your girlfriend?" That did it. I was fighting mad. Somebody had to squeak up for this guy. "For your information, I am a male golden hamster, and you are one mean bean." "Anybody got a mousetrap?" Ben snarled. "Why aren't you guys in your seat?" Miss Victoria yelled from the front of the bus. "I'm riding you up, Garth and AJ." Garth slid into the seat next to AJ and was about to give Miss Victoria a piece of my mind when the bus lurched forward, and I had to hold on to my cage for dear life. I was sorry I'd eaten those Nutri-Nibbles just before we left. All week, I'd been looking forward to going home with Garth. Now I wasn't so sure I'd even make it there. Friendship is one mind in 2 bodies.